It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Welcome back, fellow Quillers, to this very exciting third anniversary episode of Don't Quill the Messenger. It's hard to believe that we started this journey together 3 years ago this week. January 2019 was when we dropped our first episode, and here we are 3 years later, and it is time for our annual anniversary episode where we invite onto the program our executive producer, the founder and owner of Dragon Wagon Radio, and popular filmmaker, Lloyd Bacon. Jake, welcome back to the program.
Thanks again for having me, Steve. Always a pleasure to hang out with the Quillers. It's going to be great.
I always cringe when you come because you always bring emails from critics and naysayers, negative reviews, and all of the mean and wicked things that people say about me and the show. So I always cringe when we do these anniversary episodes. But we also go back through the year and look at some of the wonderful correspondence we've had from our fellow Quillers and our listeners and fans. And so that's fun too. So we're going to have a mixed bag today.
Well, actually, no. I mean, I kind of feel like I have good news for you then, really. Is that I don't have any of that stuff this year. I got none of that for you, Steven. I feel like, for the most part, at least online, obviously, like there's always going to be like a random email or two. But for the most part, I think that the people who are either like, the staunch Stratfordians, say that 10 times fast, the staunch Stratfordians who are just kind of in the space, they're in the authorship space online, and they're pretty much just there to see, I hate to call it the opposition, but to see different trains of thought and then immediately jump on them as being illegitimate or, not having grounds in reality, and they want to do that immediately. And then, they want a reaction. Like they just want to jump into an argument with somebody. And I think that now that we're in, year 3 of this, I feel like all of those people, they've already said their piece. They've already hopped onto like a random episode post on Twitter or a random episode post on Instagram, not even saying anything about that episode, just jumping on to get in their 2 cents. And realizing that I wasn't going to engage in the way that they wanted, and instead just saying like, hey, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to write an email or feel free to tell us something and we'll read it on the show. Like, they don't expect that back. And I think that now that we're entering year 3, all of those people, they've already done this to the program in the past couple of years and they've given up.
Well, technically 2 weeks from now, we'll be entering into year 4 with a whole new series and season starting out. So excited about that, excited about engaging into our 4th year. And looking back on this 3rd year, it's nice to see that some of the naysayers have sort of fallen off. I think they've realized that we're not going anywhere, that we have great, intriguing guests, and truthfully, the numbers demonstrate that we are growing and our momentum continues to build. I mean, I remember when we dropped that first episode in January 2019, and we were excited because we had something like 500 or close to 500 downloads in that first month of January 2019. And now looking back at what we just came through, 2 months during 2021 have exploded our download records with more than 3,600 downloads in a 30-day period. And those are the months of September and then this most recent month of December. And that's super exciting when you look back at where we came from and where we are now.
I also like to think December, people are home with their families that they don't like, that they have no interest in talking to. It's like, it's a good month to listen to podcasts.
Okay, so you're telling me it was family holiday gathering distractions that boosted our numbers in December.
It's like I'd rather instead. I don't want to argue politics with my my weird uncle. Instead, let's argue Shakespeare authorship. But with that said, though, before we, maybe I don't know, maybe we bury the lead here, and maybe I just get right to it. About the like kind of the naysayers and sort of the negative response that you tend to get online, and how some of them who are more vocal maybe have kind of given up their fight. I want to read this one specific review that we got that I really love, that I do feel like is probably the best review that we could possibly get. This one comes from the username is Beckalee, Bekalee2, on Apple Podcasts from the US. This happened in July of 2021, and I wanted to give this person, Beckalee, some shout out on the show itself. 5-star review that says, gives me something to think about. And the review is, while I am a Stratfordian, parenthetical at the moment, I do enjoy listening to this podcast. I may not agree with them, but I enjoy listening to what they have to say. It really gives me something to think about. I've always taught my daughter that even if you don't agree with someone, you should listen to what they have to say, as long as they are logical and aren't hateful racists or bigots. I wanted to practice what I preached by listening to this podcast. I really enjoy the different guests and conversations. It has absolutely given me something to think about. So thank you guys. I will definitely keep listening. So I do hope that Beckalee is still listening. And that's exactly kind of what I'm talking about. I feel like the people who, immediately were like, oh, let's just call these people loons and shut them down, they're all gone. And now the people who are just like, well, okay, yeah, maybe I don't agree, but that doesn't mean, I have to immediately jump to this is ridiculous, because, it's ultimately about the conversation. So thanks for that 5-star review, Beckalee.
Absolutely. And, that is one of my favorite reviews from last year as well. One of the things that I love about looking at our reviews, we're at a 4.7 star rating after 69 different ratings, which is a pretty good selection, a pretty good test group there when you look at those numbers. And one thing I would like to tell our listeners is we would love to have more. We would love for that number to double and have, more than 120 reviews or 200 reviews or 300 reviews. And even if there are some strats out there listening who now go flood the charts with their vitriol, it will serve the future of the podcast, because the more reviews, the better, even if they're not positive reviews. But of course, positive reviews get us there faster. So go out there, fellow Quillers, and give us a rating and a review. We need that for the future of the podcast.
Yeah, also, I do want to just mention this, that just recently Spotify has officially added an Apple review-like system to their podcast sector. So if you listen to the program on Spotify, or even if you don't, if you just have Spotify but you listen in a different app, or if you listen on the website, you can leave a review on Spotify now as well. Obviously, Apple Podcasts is sort of the cream of the crop. That's the most important one. That's going to be the ratings and reviews that truly help the show and increase the rankings and just get it in front of more eyes, because essentially the more reviews there are, the more Apple suggests a program for other people who like things that are similar, or even on the network, or other things like that. Like, it connects it to it more because it gets more reviews. If you don't have an Apple device or really use Apple Podcasts, you can still leave a review. Honestly, if you just Google how to leave an Apple Podcast review without an iPhone or something like that, you'll find all of the the tutorials online on how to do that. It's super easy to do. So yeah, I really urge everybody listening to just take a couple minutes. It doesn't take very long. And honestly, even if you don't write a review entirely, you can still at least give it a star rating.
That's exactly right. And one of the things I'll also encourage our listeners to do, and this connects to our key sponsor, the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship, is many of the times that we have guests on the program, many of our guests have books that are published, and those books are available through Amazon. And you can go to Amazon and you can also rate and review the books of the authors that we have had as guests of the program. And I would encourage our listeners to do that, because there are a number of Stratfordians out there who will go on and find these Oxfordian publications and attack them on Amazon reviews. And we can counter that as Quillers and members of the Quiller Nation by going on, purchasing the book, and giving a review as a verifiable purchaser of that book. So I encourage everyone to do that and help boost some of our author friends who've been guests of the program.
Right.
Here's a review that was one of my favorites from this previous year by somebody with the handle M. Pisapia. And M. Pisapia says, informative, instructive, accessible. And the quote is, "This is a wonderful podcast and worth checking out. The authorship of the works of Shakespeare is a fascinating topic, and this podcast really makes the material accessible to the experts and newbies alike." And I love that review because of the newbies, because we know that so many of our listeners are truly new to this topic and discovering the Shakespeare authorship question for the first time. And we try really hard to play that balance between the tried and true Oxfordians who have been with the movement for many years, sometimes decades, and those who are brand new and finding this for the first time and delving into their own journey into this great mystery.
Yeah. As one of the aforementioned newbies, I mean, I still call myself that. Now it's been a few years, but comparatively, I respect that as well. And I do think that it is, I think I once joked with you, Steve, about like having like a label for an episode. Like, all right, this episode is specifically for like the diehards who are super familiar, have like a rating system, like the fire system here in Los Angeles, like California, where it's like, all right, this is a green episode, like everybody's gonna be fine with this one, but like this one might be yellow or orange. A red one is gonna be like, listen, we're gonna have someone on and you're gonna catch every fifth word unless you're 100% familiar with Titus Andronicus or whatever the
So we need like an Oxfordian density rating or density meter. Is that what it is? This episode is super dense and full of tons of names, dates, and knowledge.
Right. Or
this episode is less dense. It's a lot lighter. It's full of a little more humor and some more surface stuff.
We can call the dense one pausers. This is a real pauser where it's like, I need to pause this, rewind it, listen to what they said. Let me look this up. Let me Google this. Or Bing it. I don't know. Maybe you're one of the people who uses Bing. I don't mean to just immediately assume you use Google product.
That's one of my, when we receive emails from listeners, one of my favorite things is when they mention somewhere in their email about listening to episodes multiple times, or as you say, pausing episodes and then going back and re-listening to a section, or going to their whatever library they have available, whether it's their personal library or even going and finding a book online or somewhere and, checking references and sources. And I love that about the nature of this series is, we have listeners who say, I listen to you while I'm exercising. I listen to you while I'm gardening. I listen to you on my drive to and from work. And I turn it off and then I turn it back on, or I go back and listen again. And then you have the real diehards who sometimes write to me and say, I've listened to such and such episode 3 different times, and each time I get something more out of it. And that's really exciting to me because it tells me that the podcast is serving that purpose of helping people on their path to finding their truth about this great mystery.
Yeah, and I do think that what is nice about the conversation series is that it's evergreen, and so it's the sort of thing where it's an easy revisit.
Here's another one from this past year that kind of exemplifies some of that, and the title of the review is "Fledgling Oxfordian Here," and it's written by a handle that is Quill the Bell. Quel the Bell, Belle. So thank you, Quill the Bell, for this review that reads, "Wow!" exclamation point. My latest favorite episode is now author and director. Thank you, Stephen. It was nothing short of thrilling. Well, thank you, Quill the Bell. I'll take that compliment. Then she goes on to say, the latest episode with Dorothea Dickerman about the women in Oxford's life, so that had to have been back around the middle of the year, where they appear in his poems and plays, was fabulous. Lots about his biography, too. I got started on this topic by reading Shakespeare by Another Name by Mark Anderson and have been fascinated ever since. a great detective story by scholars using their research on literature, history, and theater to expose the great author. Fabulous review. Thank you, Quill the Bell.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I love people, name dropping books that got them on the topic from, previous and hopefully future guests. That sort of stuff was fun. There's a really awesome little indie used bookstore here in LA that's quite popular and well known called the Iliad. Have you ever been there when you lived here?
Yes, absolutely.
Love that store. And I go there pretty regularly for, little things here and there. And
it was very near, and not to interrupt, but sorry, but it was very near and right around the corner from where I had my theater on Burbank Boulevard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's right there next to the railroad tracks.
Yep.
There.
Yeah, or no,
exactly
the bus. It's next to the bus. It's next to the Chandler bike path, which is like the bus route.
Right. There you go. Exactly. That's what it is. It's the busway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every time I go in there, I go to the Shakespeare section. And I look to see if there's because they have the little section that's obviously the work of Shakespeare. And then it's the writings about Shakespeare and Shakespeare biography and all that sort of stuff. And I always check to see if they have any of, our guest books or just popular literature on the subject. And when they don't have anything, I'm always like, oh, good. Nobody got rid of their book about, no one got rid of the Mark Anderson's book or a Hank Whittemore book. That's good news at this used bookstore that they don't have any in stock, because that means people kept them. And then also I go, oh yeah, but I wanted to buy one, and then I don't get to have it. So it's sort of a double-edged sword.
I picked up a great selection of little pocket-sized, the Yale versions of the Shakespeare works that I cherish, and I picked up most of the ones that I have from that particular bookstore.
It is one of my biggest regrets. One of my best friends is an actor, Tony Wayne. He's in all the work that I do. He's also a big Shakespeare fan. One day it is a dream of mine to have you two chat on this program, because I don't think he knows anything about the authorship question. And I think he is a really fun character, as well as a very logical person. It'll be fun to hear his take on what you have to say. But I digress. I was there once, and they had a copy of Hamlet from 1895. And it was dated on the inside. It was just some printing of it. And it was absolutely stunning. It was gorgeous. It was in great shape. And I just love the idea that here's this book that's just over 100 years old, 100 plus, a couple of years. It was a few years ago. And I was like, I don't know. It was a little pricey, but it was reasonably priced for sure. But I was like, well, let me come back to it. I have to come, run a couple errands in a couple of days. I'll come back and I'll grab it in a couple of days. And when I went back, it was gone. And I was so bummed, because I wanted to get it for him for Christmas or his birthday. But they always have really fun, unique prints there. And it's a really fun little store.
There's a similar bookstore up here in Southern Oregon, in Ashland, of course, one of the Shakespeare centers of America. And that's where I picked up my Norton facsimile of the first folio. And, we're going to be coming upon the 400th anniversary of the first publication of the first folio.
Wow.
And that's going to be something that I'm sure Stratfordians, Oxfordians, Baconians, everybody who loves these works is going to be celebrating that in the coming year. Ashland is the reason I was there was I was at a SOF conference that was being held there that year. That was many years ago now. So I've owned that book for quite some time now. And the plan is that in the fall of 2022, this coming September, October period, that we will have another live conference in Ashland, Oregon. Hopefully that will be allowed to happen. It'll be the first live conference in more than 2 years now, thanks to what's been going on in the world. But we're hoping and praying that we're going to be able to get clear of this and move back into some normalcy and be able to gather Oxfordians from all over the world together once again in one location to share our research, our beliefs, our debates, and our plans for moving this forward in the world beyond just this podcast and other outreach opportunities that are out there. So But yeah, that's why I was there, and I picked that book up as one of my prized possessions. It wasn't cheap either, by the way.
Right, sure. I'm sure of it.
Even used, it was not cheap.
But it's, there's certain things you can splurge on. When is the actual anniversary? When is the actual 400th? You said it's coming up, but you didn't give a date.
Okay, now
have I put you on the spot?
I know.
I put you on the spot.
I know. Well, it was 1623, and I want to say, I'm going to be wrong, but I'm going to say I think May of 1623.
All right, you're allowed to be wrong. I'll allow it.
I could be wrong, but go ahead, write to me, everybody, and correct me. I love that. I love when people send me an email and say, "Well, you got this date wrong, or you got that person wrong." I'm an entertainer, not a scholar. I'm doing my best here. Here's one from the previous year that I wanted to share because it also does a little bit of that name dropping that you talked about and mentions a specific episode as well as a specific book, but it also points out some of the difficulty, some of the work that we've been doing as Oxfordians over the last 100 years. And she actually signs the review with her first name, Mary, and her handle is Puff Puff de l'Amérique. If I pronounced that correctly. Puff Puff de l'Amérique.
Sure.
I'm just going to go with Mary.
Yeah, sometime mid-May. Sometime mid-May. It's definitely sometime in May sometime, yeah.
Yeah. She writes, brilliant. Loved especially Ben August's interview on winning the auction for the Herodotus book owned by Edward de Vere. As an undergrad at Carleton College in the 1970s, when I raised the authorship question, my Yale PhD English professor flew into a frenzy. My first clue on the boneheaded intolerance of the orthodox, a Glover's son who never wrote a single letter in his life wrote the plays and epic poems. Had no idea until Mark Anderson's book that the evidence was so overwhelming. Now have colleagues globally who are Oxfordians. Needless to say, kept my suspicions to myself at the University of Chicago Grad School in English. And Looney published his brilliant work in 1920. What the hell were all these professors thinking? Thank you, Mary. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I love that. I love these firsthand accounts. As someone who's, at the opposite end of the academic spectrum, that's what I like to say. I really do love people's firsthand accounts of English professors or just, any sort of college professor or collegiate, academic type getting really flustered and getting very like, nope, that's not even a thing that we just like, Alexandra, who's been a guest in the pod that first year. My much better half has the exact same story where like somebody brought it up like first week, and was like, we will not be discussing that, or none of those words will be mentioned in this, in the syllabus. Like, and how it's just it's so funny to me. How anybody who can consider themselves, a teacher whose whole point is to kind of, pique kids' interest, or not kids, anybody, adults at some point, pique people's interest and explore and learn and, garnish fact, is just like, no, let's just not talk about that.
In some settings, when you mention the Shakespeare authorship question or Oxfordianism at all in any way, it's like you suddenly whipped out pornography or something.
Right.
Like it becomes so taboo. Yeah. That is not allowed here. It's like, for lack of a better term, it's like a fart in church, right? It's like, what just happened? You're not allowed to do that. Get out. And that, I think, is so telling in so many ways as to how threatened the orthodoxy is and has become over this, but also the fact that Oxfordians have been beating their heads against this wall for far too long. And one of the things that I have continued to say over the years that I fully believe is that we need to stop that fight. We need to end that battle. English professors, PhDs in English Lit are not ever going to change their minds. They're not ever going to accept Oxfordian scholars as legitimate scholars. They are never going to suddenly see the light, have some great, miraculous, incredible revelation. That's not going to happen. And we need to just leave them alone, let them do their thing, let them all start dying out as our movement continues to grow and progress. And the area that we need to focus the most on, the couple of areas, I would say, number one is education of those who don't know anything, who aren't English lit majors, right, who don't know all of the orthodoxy. Two, historians. We need to be focusing on historians and the history and how the history spells the truth. I think that's a crucial key that we need to continue to drum upon. And then three, we need to use entertainment. We need to use modern means of information. We need to be pushing more social media. We need to be doing more outreach programs. We need to be offering teachers in schools opportunities to have curriculum that they have ready-made that they can share with their classrooms. And we need to be putting out more content like this podcast and more informative and fun and entertaining YouTube videos, and then some sort of theatrical presentations and video if possible.
Yeah, and to that point, and this is a thing I'm sure that if somebody just discovered this podcast and they have like binged it all and they have heard all of these anniversary episodes back to back, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, I heard all these exact same stuff last time. But since it's been a year for the people who listen constantly, I'll repeat myself once again. The thing that got me into this was not my love for Shakespeare. It was the fascination with the evidence. It was like it's like the same reason that people love like the true crime podcasts, or, like the same reason that I am fascinated with D.B. Cooper is the same reason I'm fascinated with the authorship question, is because things just don't make sense. And somewhere out there, they do. And that to me is what makes it so interesting. And so there are, I'm sure, countless others like me who, may not even care about the work of Shakespeare. Not that they don't appreciate it and go, yeah, I get it. I understand it was the most, crucial artistic work in the English language. But, it's not always about just the work. It is also sometimes about the mystery. And I do think that, that is a big net when you talk about catching the historians and stuff. I feel like, in fact, I was just looking at this and it has to be the exact same person because of the names. You mentioned earlier the person who left a review, Quill the Bell. Mm-hmm. Well, there's also someone on Twitter, let me re-find it, which has to be the same person because their name is Quell the Hell is the name on Twitter. So I'm assuming it's the same person. They also acknowledge the same thing that they did in the review. And I love this because do you know Eric Alper?
No, I don't know that I do.
He's a music publicist and a host of a couple of podcasts, I think, and Sirius XM radio shows. Eric Alper is his name on Twitter, and he's just he's got a big, huge following, and he's just sort of an arts journalist. And he tweeted something. He said, "Hey, you suddenly find yourself on stage for your own TED Talk with no prior planning. What's a topic you can discuss for 18 minutes straight?" And this person, Quell the Hell, responded, "The Shakespeare authorship question. Thanks mostly to the podcast Don't Quill the Messenger and the book Shakespeare by Another Name by Mark Anderson."
Oh, that's awesome. That makes me feel all tingly inside.
Yeah. But I do think like that's it. Like that's the truth, is that like, I mean, I don't know if maybe you're not this sort of person. You also have children, and understandably so, you don't have as much time as some of the rest of us do because of said children. But there will definitely be a day or two where I blink and I have just spent like 3 hours watching random TED Talks about things I had no interest in prior. Like that will just happen. Like it will just be like, oh man, I was just on YouTube and I was just watching, and then like another one auto played and I thought like, yeah, sure, I want to see a TED Talk about getting plastic out of the ocean. And it's like, yeah, sure, I want to see a TED Talk on the way, hearing aids have changed, the science of blah, blah, blah. And like, it's stuff that you have no interest in prior, but you dive into it. And I feel like this is one of those topics that like, if someone came across it in a TED Talk, they would be immediately fascinated by it.
Yeah, and here's one that I love that I'm going to follow up with when I finish reading it. And this one is from somebody called the Bard Man, which is actually a nickname that I have used regularly in my life. In fact, when I was in California, my license plate said Bard Man on my car.
I like, what I love about that? What I love about that is that there were a ton of people, probably people around our age, because I feel like the target demographic, who very abruptly saw your license plate and assumed in quick, corner of the eye passing, it said Bartman, Bart Simpson's alter ego. And they were like, that guy really loves The Simpsons. That countless people were like, oh, wow, that guy he must have really enjoyed The Simpsons when it was on.
I hope not. I hope people are better educated than that and know who the Bard is.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, if you read it really quickly, really abruptly. My license plate says Kingsman, without the vowels, in reference to the, King Arthur's Knights, the Knights of the Round Table. Or for the sake of this show, to the Kings, to the Kingsmen, to the, the theater group. That's what it's really for. No. And I always get the weirdest things. People go, license plate, does that stand for, what's a kangaroo smith or whatever? They always come up with the most absurd things. And to me, it's obvious. But, all I'm saying is you'd be surprised.
If you need a decoder to decode somebody's personalized license plate, it's probably not doing the job it was meant to do. I'm just saying.
Right.
So the Bard Man is one of our Canadian listeners, one of our Canucks who tunes into the program, and the title of his review was "It's the Truth!" ! And he writes, "Nice to discover this site. Well done, and certainly convinced me." Happy face. "Keep up the good work. I'm a teacher and make authorship knowledge mandatory in my classes." And that's the type of thing I'm talking about. That we need more people like that out there in the world, and we need to arm them with what they need to continue doing what they're doing. And I would love to have the Bard Man from Canada. Please, if you're listening, contact me. You would make a great guest of this program. I'd love to have you on and talk to you about how you make this mandatory in your class, how your colleagues around you respond to that fact, how your students are responding to it. I think that would make a fascinating episode, and we have a lot of teachers out there who listen. Some of them are closet Oxfordians because they're afraid of the backlash from their colleagues. Perhaps you could come on the show and help empower them to step forward and courageously continue the fight against these falsehoods and the mythology of Stratfordianism.
I'm also interested to see what he teaches and what age he teaches. Is he a high school teacher? Is he a college professor? He said teacher. He didn't say professor. So I don't know why my brain immediately goes to high school. But I think that's another thing too, is I think when we talk about academia, it's usually college to me, but I do feel like even if more high school English teachers or high school history teachers were invested in the subject, I think it would do a lot for just the general population's understanding of it. Because I can think my own experiences of high school teachers being really important, especially if you're just a young art nerd. If you're the sort of person who's going to be interested in stuff like this to begin with, your art teachers and your English teachers are always the people you have the closest relationships with, and you look up to them. And I do feel like there were things that I was taught in high school that when I got to college, and I should put quotes around college considering where I went, but there were things I were taught were in high school. When I got to college, I was like, oh yeah, no, I don't. I was so highly influenced by high school teachers that I was like, oh yeah, no, I disagree with what this is. I did I think it was a film analysis class that I did, and my English teacher from high school, who was the guy who taught he directed our plays, and he was just one of those teachers that would sort of speak to us like adults, and he would teach us things that he was interested in. And I feel like that sort of behavior, it nurtured some more free thought and open-mindedness to things. And then, sometimes you get to college and you have a professor who's very staunch or has just been doing this very specific thing for so long that they're just going through the syllabus, or they're just going through the motions. And I feel like I don't know, I just feel like for me personally, the high school, teachers really stick with you.
Hopefully he's listening. Hopefully the Bard man in Canada, the teacher who is teaching this in his classroom, is listening, and he will contact us. Remember, you can email me at contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. Contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. That's contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. Write to us. We'd love to hear from you. Here's one from our first year, and it's our only 1-star review. And it comes from Sicinius in Great Britain back in June of 2019. And the title is Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. And we've had Dr. Roger Strittmatter on the program multiple times over the last 3 years. And we've even had an episode where Roger came on and we talked about the type of vitriolic attacks that he suffers mostly. He's one of the most prominent faces of Oxfordianism and has been for quite some time. And so he bears a lot of the brunt of the academic attacks that come from the staunch Stratfordians. And so this one, though we have reviewers who mention guests by name in other reviews and in positive reviews, I think Roger should take this one as a badge of honor, because this guy wrote back in June of 2019, attacking Roger particularly on a specific, rabbit hole issue, like you mentioned. And then, of course, we see these people fade off and disappear as they realize they can't quill this messenger. So he writes, Dr. Roger Strittmatter has proved himself incapable of discerning Shakespearean quality in the verse of Sir Edmund Dyer more than once. In the book being reviewed here, he proves himself incapable of discerning Shakespearean quality in Shakespeare, having failed to spot that their EEBO, the resource in which he searches for his parallels, comprises 2 unequal collections of early modern books. He bases all his calculations on the smaller half and goes on to get everything wrong. Of course he does. He's working inadvertently with half the data. This has been pointed out to him. Instead of retiring and withdrawing the book, add the second half and Strittmatter's thesis doesn't stand up. The Shakespeare-Oxford Fellowship chummily supports the doctor in his attempt to pretend his egregious errors don't matter. What we have here is a fully documented instance of the blind being willingly led by the blind. And that's the kind of stuffy nonsense we get from these people that don't seem to get it. They don't seem to get the point of this program. They don't seem to get the point of the guests. And they certainly don't seem to get the point of asking questions, digging, finding, seeking truth.
I do notice that, like, most of the people who do tend to write stuff like that, there's not a counterpoint. There's not a, well, okay, I understand that you said this, but what about this? It tends to just be, this person's bad, this person's wrong, this person's an idiot, this person has no idea what they're talking about. And that's sort of the argument. It's not, it's not like, okay, well, what about this piece of evidence? I would be interested to hear your thoughts on that. And actually, that's actually, that brings me to this other tweet that we got early in the year. Oh, geez, my phone shut off. There we go. All right. From a user on Twitter named Amara at YOWMY15, at YOWMY15. And they tweeted at us, and this might be obviously more visuals, but it says, "Hey, Don't Quill the Pod. As a longtime follower of the podcast, I would love to hear a discussion on some of the archive evidence cited by Stratfordians, such as," and then they include a link to shakespearedocumented.folger.edu, which I assume is, the Folger Library's documented evidence of Shakespeare. Obviously you click the link and there's a ton of things there, but this to me is, and by the way, this is a person who, I think is already an Oxfordian but I do like that, like, this is the sort of retort or this sort of exploration that I think is more beneficial. It's them specifically saying, hey, would love to hear you talk about this specific thing, instead of just, you're wrong.
Well, I will put the call out there to our guests and some of our more scholarly guests that have been popular on the program. I'm sure will be more than happy to come on and do an episode with me that basically is designed to go point by point through the 6 different facts that we actually have about the man from Stratford that connect him in any way to the works of Shakespeare. The truth of the matter is there's not a lot of content there. And what we find throughout the history of this misidentification, and that's what I'll call it, whether it was misidentification on purpose or by accident, is also a great debate to be had. But nonetheless, the misidentification is based in so little evidence, and we really truly don't know much at all about William Shakespeare of Stratford that goes beyond certain legal documents mainly. And so when we look at those, we could truly, all these biographies of him that are all full of, well, he might have, and he could have, and he must have, and he should have, and he probably did. None of that is fact. None of that is history. None of that is based in any kind of a reality. It's all conjecture, and it's all whole cloth conjecture based on when you look at the actual documents. How can you infer that a man who was hoarding grain was the greatest writer of all time?
Right.
How do you infer from the documents about his property dealings and his investments that we have? How can you infer anything that he ever wrote anything? And that's it's such a jump that I don't know that you could do a full hour program on it, quite honestly.
Well, yeah, but in any case, like that tweet is from February of 2021. If you simply go to @Don'tQuillThePod on Twitter and click the mentions tab and scroll back, you'll find that from Amara at YaoMai15 on Twitter. If you want to find a link to that, because I do like this stuff, though. I do like the analyzing of some historical documents, even if they are business related or governmental and not personal in some capacity. Because I do think that is, that's the thing that most piqued my interest in this topic more than anything else was Bonner Miller Cutting's exploration of the will of Shakespeare. That to me is like the most, if there was a smoking gun, that's it, in my opinion. And I do think that to me is what was the most fascinating thing. So I do think stuff like what Amara on Twitter is suggesting is something I'd love to see more of personally, is like, oh, here's what they have. Let's analyze this.
One of the most famous lines, obviously, in the will of Shakespeare of Stratford is that segment where he leaves to his wife his second best bed.
Yeah.
And if you haven't listened to the episode where Bonner dissects that will, and remember, this is a woman who has studied literally thousands of wills of the day, of the period, and compared them to each other to do her analysis of this particular famous will. And if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. If you've listened to it before, listen to it again, because it is a fascinating dissection of that document that I think you're right, Jake, really just blows holes left and right. It Swiss cheeses the Stratfordian argument in ways that no other program does. And
it's absurd.
It is. Let's move on, because last episode I issued a challenge to the Quiller Nation to send me their sonnets, and I made an offer at that time that I would pay for the annual dues membership for 1 year to the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship to the winner of this sort of pseudo sonnet contest that we put out there, the Sonnet Challenge, I'll call it. And we received quite a number of wonderful entries. I'd like to go through a few of them in just a moment. But before I do, I want to remind everybody listening that it is that time of year. It is membership renewal time for the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. If you haven't renewed your annual membership, the time to do it is now. I just recently renewed my annual membership. I purchased a family membership to drag my wife further into this movement. And as I do every year, I also purchased a gift membership for a friend who I know is interested in the subject but needs to learn more. And so now that friend will be receiving the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship quarterly newsletter, as well as regular updates about activities of the organization as a gift from me to them. A gift membership is a wonderful way to share this organization, this movement, and information with a friend who may be interested or may be teetering on the edge. You may be teetering on the edge, and you may have been a Quiller listener for quite some time, but have yet to actually take the plunge and join the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. I encourage you to do that now. It's easy to do. You can go to the website, shakespeareoxfordfellowship.org, shakespeareoxfordfellowship.org. Click on the button membership, choose the membership that suits you best. You can become a member for as little as $44 for the year. It's that easy, that simple, and yes, that inexpensive. And you know that by joining the organization, you are supporting the organization's efforts, including its efforts to support research and further information about this question and further seeking of the truth. You also become, as a dues-paying member in good standing, a voting member of the organization, and you can use your vote to help shape and direct how the organization moves forward in the coming 100 years by joining the organization today. So please go to shakespeareoxfordfellowship.org, shakespeareoxfordfellowship.org, join the movement, and become a member today.
100 years. I feel like it's a little presumptuous. I know we've made leaps and bounds in science and people are living longer, but that does seem like kind of a stretch, Stephen.
Well, it all began in 1920 with J. Thomas Looney's publication. So
in the next, so you're saying in the next 20,
that's correct.
In the next 100 years.
In the next 100 years. We've had 100 years of this.
I thought the way that you said that, you were like, yeah, your membership allows you to vote for the next 100 years. And I'm like, that seems like some weird Scientology billion-year contract stuff, Stephen. Come on now.
It's true.
Let's get ahead of ourselves.
One thing is true is that this organization, Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship has changed names and configurations over the years, but the root base organization is now more than almost 70 years old. It's feasible to believe that it will move forward for another 70 years, maybe 100. Who knows? Hopefully, Hopefully, it won't take that long to convince the world of the truth. We receive hundreds of emails combined within the various means of contact between me and guests and listeners. I counted them. I started counting some of them up the other night, and over the last 3 years, it literally has been hundreds of emails back and forth with listeners and comments and guests. And so reminding everyone that the best way to reach me is contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com, contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. And I want you to know, I personally respond to every listener who contacts me. I did not respond to the listeners who submitted the sonnets that we're about to share in the Sonnet Challenge because, one, I didn't want there to be any inferred favoritism. We love all listeners equally. And two, I didn't want to tip my hat about which ones I was going to choose to read today on the air or which one is going to be selected as the winner of the contest.
Got it.
Let's start with the first one, and I must tell you that also that they are not presented in any order of preference indicating the winner. If anything, the way that I selected them and put them in order was by who sent their submission first. So they are actually in the order of submission within the top 4 or 5 that I selected here to share with the listeners today. So the first one is titled A Prince's Plaint, and it is by Christopher Wiley of Portland, Maine. O crimson queen, from whom all good life flows, why hast thou clipped my eager raptor's wings, denied the kill, left only pose without the blood, the song its nature sings? A hawk should soar, its piercing gaze cast wide, its shadow bringing sudden mortal dread, not tethered to an earthly master's side, a blinding hood fixed ever to its head. What apparition wheels above thy grace? What hideous screech has turned thy heart to stone? What glass has dared reveal thy secret face? What fearsome weight is borne by thee alone? Truly, truth itself cannot be e'er denied. It shines in this long after we have died. Thank you, Christopher Wiley.
Lovely.
Notice how he worked ever into the line there. And also truly truth. I love the creativity there, Christopher. Congratulations on being selected as one of our finalists. And
this is lovely.
It was very well written. You want to hear another one?
Yeah, I'd like to read one.
Do you have them?
I know you got me up at least an hour and a half before I would ever get up to do this, so my voice might still be a little morning-y, but I'd love to read one. Yeah, I have them.
Do you have the next one on my list is from Judy Lewis. Do you have hers?
Yes, I do have hers.
Why the Author Matters.
Why the Author Matters by Judy Lewis of it does not say. Let's see here. Okay. Let me take a sip of coffee here.
I will do the same. In fact, I'm going to take a sip of coffee. We'll use this as a little parting break. I will take a sip of coffee out of my beautiful Don't Quill the Messenger coffee mug.
Hey.
And remind our listeners that you can support the program by going to the swag shop, where you will find wonderful merchandise. Don't Quill the Messenger merchandise is available there. I love my coffee mug. I have my mask that I have to wear in public settings that has my has the Don't Quill logo on it. I have multiple t-shirts. Next, I'd like a ball cap. I'm going to be working on that with Jake, that we need ball caps available. And perhaps even lapel pins.
Ball caps is tough in our shop. I'm going to go ahead and put that out there. But this is what I'm going to say. If enough people buy t-shirts and mugs, then we can talk about it.
All right, very good. Go out there and buy your t-shirts and mugs, people, and support the program, support the shop, and help us expand our merch.
Why the Author Matters. You ask me, does it matter? Who cares why? This man or that breathed life into a play. A life is just a life. A name can die. Be lost to time, but still his work will stay. As bright a star that ever graced the skies, he shaped the places, people, all he knew, their voices and their deeds, their very lives, into the scenes we cherish, acts so true. And though his life breathes life into each play, here in the dark we see but half the thought. His life's blank page is night when we want day, a life unknown, an emptiness they brought. Without his vivid tale, what have we lost? The degradation of the work's the cost.
Well done, sir. Well done, Judy. Thank you, Judy, for that submission.
That was lovely.
And here's one by Martin Carden. Might be pronounced Carden, but this is from Martin, and the title is A Sonnet for Stephen and DQTM. Our host asks questions. His bold guests make clear untruths produced to shroud and mask a bard. That Stratford Patsy wrote all great Shakespeare. Yet believing that seems awfully hard. Each fortnightly podcast helps clear the haze with evidence aired to help us propose De Vere. True truth is found in all his plays, poems, and sonnets writ to his sweet rose. So listen carefully, and you just might hear views sound, clues strong, convincing you that our Stephen and guests have offered insight. And establishment hacks should eat their hat. Thus, Quillers, stay open. For one thing we know, 'tis well past time for that Strat lad to go.
Oh, that's fantastic. Do you think this is the very first sonnet ever written that uses the word podcast?
That's quite possible, as a matter of fact.
It might be the very first time anybody's written a sonnet using the word podcast. I mean,
it might also be the very first time that somebody referred to Quillers in a poem as well.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, but the vainglorious aspect of my nature is also pleased to have my name mentioned in a sonnet.
Sure, of course, yes. Yeah.
I don't know that anyone's ever written a sonnet and mentioned me in it before. So.
Feed your ego a little bit here. We'll let you.
I'm going to read one more. And then a little fun little ditty that this particular submitter also sent. This is by David Newfer, and it's called Shakespeare's Sonnet. And then he offers up a little fun thing at the end as well. But I'll start with the sonnet. Shakespeare's Sonnet by David Newfer. Shall I compare thee to a sack of grain, or many sacks in granaries to hold from summer fields blessed with abundant rain to winter's famine yielding sacks of gold? When need is high, the price need also rise. A merchant must be firm to stay ahead. Thy family's life is what thy money buys. This letteth me to purchase mine best bed. Hast thou not funds? Not everything is dark. Manna you may taketh as from heaven. Upon this document affix thy mark. In time return the cost to me times 7. To you that owe for grain I stored away, I'll sue your arse anon if you don't pay. Thank you, David. Making fun of the Shakespeare man and his grain dealings, his grain hoardings, his money lending, and his suing of those who did not pay him, oftentimes for minor amounts of money, in fact, when in the grand collective scheme of things. But he also includes this little text option for a future Shakespeare's monument inscription. And those of you who know the famous inscription at the monument in Stratford, you'll enjoy this as well. If not, those of you who don't know, this is one of those pause moments where you can go and look it up and find it and compare it to what David has written here. Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones. If you some dust did move away to find these extra things, I say, then pray proceed to readeth more. Just leave my bones beneath the floor, the ink and quill doth give distress. My signature's a wicked mess. It matters not what you have heard. I never did compose a word. Thank you, David.
Those are great.
Yeah, that's. I hope that Quillers out there right now are getting a nice little snicker. Thank you to all of you who submitted sonnets. We really don't have time to go through all of those that were submitted as part of the Sonnet Challenge, but these were some of my favorites. And I want to thank you all for responding so quickly as well. Some of you were firing them off just the day after that episode was posted. So happy to have that response. And some of these are quite delightful. Now, before I announce which one I thought was the best, I'd like to hear from you, Jake Lloyd Bacon, what you thought, and see if we end up choosing the same.
You know what? Art is subjective. I actually think I kind of might have a tie. I think A Prince's Plaint, I think Christopher Wiley's has a language and a sharpness to it that feels incredibly authentic to me, and it feels there's a weight to it that I love, and there's obviously an imagery to it that I love. And on the other side of that, I think Martin's was just hilarious to me. Like there's a levity to Martin's. Martin Carden is
Yes.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the emails abruptly here, and so I'm kind of torn between those two. I love them both for different reasons. I mean, as somebody who I love a turn of phrase. I love some comedy. I'm torn because I do think that Martin's is incredibly funny and witty. And I do think that Christopher's is actually quite beautiful. So I sort of have two sides of that same coin.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that because, I chose two that were more what I'd call more traditional sonnet-like. And you're right. They were more true to the Shakespearean style.
Yes.
Although there are some of Shakespeare's sonnets that are, if you understand what's being said there, are actually very humorous.
Yes, of course.
And, but not as much as, of course, what Martin and,
right.
What Martin has done and what David has done. But I wanted to, I chose two that were more traditional like, and then two that were on the humorous side, because I felt that would be most entertaining to our listeners. But I have to agree, and though all four were fantastic and I enjoyed them all, and that's why we've read them all here on the program, I do believe that A Princess Plaint by Christopher Wiley is the winner that I would choose. And Christopher, I will be paying your dues for 2022 as a member of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. If you have already renewed your membership for the organization, please shoot me an email and let me know, and we'll work out how that's going to happen, how that's going to work out. If not, I will be contacting the member of the board of trustees who is responsible for membership, and I will be forwarding the funds to purchase you an individual membership for the year. Thank you, Christopher, for your wonderful sonnet, A Princess Plaint. I think it goes without saying that it should be read again.
And you know what? Listen, I love bringing a little chaos and joy to this program as much as I can. While not a annual membership to the SOF, I'm going to go ahead and, as our runner-up, because I did love it so very much, I'm going to shoot Martin Carden an email back, and we're going to go ahead and send Martin a free shirt of his choosing from Dragon Wagon Shop.
That's awesome. Great. Thanks, Jake. That's fantastic. Well, there you go, Martin. You're as first runner-up, you're going to receive a free Don't Quill the Messenger t-shirt. Jake will contact you by email and send you a discount code that you'll be able to use to order the shirt you want online, and it will come to you free of charge.
Yeah, it's still a very good job. Well done.
Absolutely. And also congratulations to Judy and David for being selected to be read here.
And thanks to everybody who sent stuff. Like Stephen said, we had a lot. There were a few that I actually was looking forward to reading, but unfortunately it is a time thing, and some of them were quite long. But thanks to everybody who we've chatted to about these sonnets.
Well, and Jake, I want to personally kiss up to the boss and thank you for your magnificent network, the Dragon Wagon Radio Network. We at Don't Quill the Messenger are proud to be a member of that network and proud to be offered through that network. I express appreciation to my colleagues on the network who host their own shows. And if you haven't explored Dragon Wagon Radio Network's other podcasts, you should. I'm sure you'll find something else there that you will enjoy. It's a fabulous network filled with great programs hosted by great people. And so I encourage you to dig in and find some other topics there that you will enjoy. But I want to thank you, Jake, for all the work that you put in to support the program, produce the program, and provide it such a magnificent platform that has been so successful over the past 3 years. And I look forward to continuing to work with you on the next season and another year of wonderful episodes.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. And yeah, I do the best I can to present Don't Quill in the best possible way. I'm going to use the term post-pandemic. Not that I think the pandemic is over, but just in the post-pandemic world in which we have, everything is remote. You and I aren't sitting next to each other today. We are probably on our respective couches wearing our respective pajama pants. At least one of us is. But in that world,
no, that would be both of us. Yep.
All right. Good. Glad to know. Glad to know. Little kids, listen, guys, listeners. Stephen got me up very early on a Saturday. All right. I'm not usually awake and functioning at this point in time. It's almost 11. Like if you never awake by 11. Anyways, what I was saying was, considering that we live in such a remote world, there are a whole new set of challenges that come to just getting a podcast done. And so I want to thank you, Stephen, for all of your hard work in ensuring that my job is as easy as possible. I know it's always tough with certain guests, certain people. Everybody is at a different level technologically, and it can sometimes be more difficult than it should be. It feels, but I do the best I can to ensure that it's a slick and a professional program as possible, that it has everything it needs to thrive. And
I'm certain that the Quillers out there are not aware of these facts, and I think that they should be aware of the fact that oftentimes, as Jake says, we're recording remotely. In fact, several episodes this year were the first few times that we were able to connect with a guest overseas and record remotely,
right.
Time zones away from each other, continents away from each other. And Jake never knows what types of files he's going to get, how he's going to receive those files. And
I do not.
He's responsible for taking the files that are delivered to him and seaming them together in a way that makes it sound as good as it possibly can and as clear as it possibly can. And oftentimes we have listeners who say, wow, it sounded like you guys were in the same room together, even though, Alexander Waugh was actually thousands of miles away in Britain while I was sitting on my sofa in Southern Oregon. And it was, 1 o'clock in the morning, my time, and 9 a.m. his time. Those are the types of things that Jake makes possible through the magic that he does and the work that he does, as well as nobody knows this, I'm certain, Jake, and that is Jake provides all the graphics. I send him a proposed episode title, details about what the episode is, and then he goes and creates all the art, all the graphics for each of now almost 80 episodes. And sometimes, very few times, has he contacted me and said, I need an idea for a graphic. Send me a piece of art. I need help. He does that all on his own and puts together the wonderful graphics for each of the episodes. So thank you for that too, Jake.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. And only, I will say this, over the 77 episodes, your spelling has gotten much better, Stephen, in your descriptions. I'd have to do a lot less. I do have to do a lot less rereading. All I'm going to say is I feel like sometimes Stephen writes the show descriptions very abruptly and doesn't reread his work, is all I'm saying.
Well, that's what producers are for, right?
Listen, we set your ego up a little bit there. I had to kind of knock you down just a tiny
That's all
bit.
right.
Just got to keep you level.
I'll take it. It's true. Sometimes I'm all thumbs on the keyboard, especially when I'm sending you an audio file and writing a description at 2 o'clock in the morning after talking to a guest from Britain. So...
right. Oh, of course. Yeah, the time difference. Oh man, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. That's a real thing, but I don't mind. It's worth doing, and we've had some great guests from across the pond, and I look forward to inviting more guests from our different countries. In fact, I've been in email discussions with one of our listeners in Chile about trying to arrange for him to be a guest. He's been doing some wonderful research, and I would love to get him on. I would love to get Luis Sousa on the program as a guest. I know he's listening, and I hope he's excited that I just mentioned him, and I hope he will be encouraged to jump on board and come be a guest. Luis, we would love to set that up. We'll figure it out. We are capable of doing it. We have the technology. We can rebuild him.
I love that.
So watch for that, folks, as we move into season 4 of Don't Quill the Messenger, with new guests, new exciting topics, and more wonderful research ahead as we move into 2022 and the 400th anniversary year of the first folio coming just around the corner in 2023. So be prepared for a magnificent year ahead of Oxfordianism and details about the Shakespeare authorship question. Before we close up, I would like to remind you one last time, please visit shakespeareoxfordfellowship.org. Renew your membership if you have not yet, or join the organization and become a member for the first time if you have not done so yet as well. Join the movement, become a part of the solution to the problem by joining the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. Also, don't forget shakespeareoxfordfellowship.org is your source and resource for all things Shakespeare authorship question. You can find a plethora of resources there at your fingertips and spend hours rabbit holing into the website of the organization. Please do that. Please go and visit. And with that said, thank you, Jake. Another year done.
Thank you. Yeah, this was it's always a fun time just hanging out, catching up. I hope that the Quillers enjoy these little anniversary episodes where we do really nothing but just talk about ourselves. It is really talk about the vaingloriousness of a show, but it's fun to just sort of, every now and then hit the pause button of the actual format and just say like, hey, how we're doing? Let's check in. Let's have a moment of self-care.
Well, over the last 2 years, we have literally more than doubled our number of downloads per month. We have doubled our number of annual more than doubled our number of annual downloads. We're now at somewhere close to 74,000 total downloads over 3 years.
Let me pull up. Actually, this is always fun to do before we leave. I know that we're going a little bit long, but whatever. It's okay. It's a podcast. People pause it and they come back to it. Let's see here. Let me go to some fun. These are my favorites. This is my absolute favorite thing. I want to go down to in the date range. The show started January of 2019. So I'm going to go to January 1st, 2019. I'm going to set the date range from that until now. And I'm going to go down to countries. And it looks like 97 countries has been our overall reach. This is always one of my favorite things. Don't Kill the Messenger, since its inception, has been downloaded at minimum of once in order to make it on this list, obviously. So maybe, one person in, Montenegro downloaded one episode once. But in any case, we're still on it. It counts. That's a country we've reached. 97 different countries. Isn't that incredible?
That is incredible. And I've seen that list, and I know that when you go up the list, yes, there are quite a few on the list where we have 1 or 2 or maybe 3 downloads. There are some countries on the list where we have 75, 76 downloads. And so you can infer that maybe that's one listener who's listened to all of the full gamut of episodes.
I feel like Turks and Caicos Islands. I feel like we know who that person might be, don't we?
I think we have 2 or 3. When I visited there, I made some converts, so I think we now have several listeners there on the island. So
then they need to catch up. It sounds like they need to catch up. Then I like in Egypt, there's like 80, which is fun. It's like, all right, we have like one person in Egypt who's like a diehard who maybe had a friend listen to a couple. It's fun to imagine. I just love that number. And then of course, as far as total unique downloads since the show's inception, we're at 74,651. So a lot of milestones coming up. What's the math on if this is episode 77 and there's 52 weeks in a year, Don't Quill every other week, 26 episodes, that we should be hitting our 100th episode this year.
That's correct. We'll be hitting our 100th episode, and I believe, based on those numbers, at almost 75,000 total downloads already, and at the rate that we're going, by mid-year, I would say June or July, we should hit our 100,000th download.
Our first 100K, which would be a lovely milestone.
Fellow Quillers, you can help with that by sharing the podcast with friends. Let some friends know about us. Ask them to tune in. Share some of your favorite episodes with them. I know that a lot of people like to begin at the top and start at the very first episode and go through them. But this isn't serial television. It's not episodic in that way. You can bounce around from topics that you enjoy and like, and many listeners do that. You know who your friends are, and you know what will intrigue them and what will interest them, and you know the 77 episodes. Choose 2 or 3 that you think will appeal to someone and turn them on to it and see what happens after that. I guarantee you'll create some converts, and then you'll have a friend you can actually debate and discuss these things with, who won't cast you out of their home because you're a heretic.
Sure, of course, love that.
Right?
So again, I know we're wrapping this up here. I just want to say thanks again for letting me hang out and yap. I know that I'm not the type of guest people are generally used to hearing, so it's always fun hanging out with you. And I know that you already said it once, but I do urge some listeners to check out any other shows on Dragon Wagon Radio. You can just go to dragonwagonradio.com and see them all. We have all sorts of shows. We've got mental health programs about pop culture, programs about movies, all sorts of profile and conversation pieces. Lots of really fun stuff there, all at dragonwagonradio.com.
Parenting. There's at least one program about parenting.
Yep. There's tons of fun stuff over there, and as always, as Dragon Wagon Radio enters its 5-year anniversary this March, we even have a couple other things lined up. So all of that can be found at Dragon Wagon Radio, where you can also find Don't Quill as well as the shop. I urge everybody to go ahead and snag some merch from the shop. Also, if you are on social media, find at Don't Quill the Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Steven has too many kids for social media, but you can find me at Jake Lloyd Bacon. So that's another way to reach the show If you just have a question, you could always just write me or contact me at Jake Lloyd Bacon on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah,
as a marketing and communications professional, I spend so much of my regular day on social media and monitoring social media for my day job that from a personal, like it's kind of like the auto mechanic who has, broken down cars in his own driveway because by the time he gets home from work, the last thing he wants to do is pop open another hood.
You know what? That's actually the mechanic. I don't use that one. I've always heard the phrase every plumber has leaky pipes. That's what I've always heard.
Okay.
And I feel like that's the same. I as somebody who also makes a living in Los Angeles helping lots of actors and filmmakers with their work, my stuff is always done last. So I totally get that. Get that.
It's a real thing. All right, so we're going to wrap it up, and we'll leave you fellow Quillers once more with A Prince's Plaint by Christopher Wiley, now an award-winning sonnet. O crimson queen, from whom all good life flows, why hast thou clipped my eager raptor's wings, denied the kill, left only noble pose without the blood, the song its nature sings? A hawk should soar, its piercing gaze cast wide, its shadow bringing sudden mortal dread, not tethered to an earthly master's side, a blinding hood fixed ever to its head. What apparition wheels above thy grace? What hideous screech has turned thy heart to stone? What glass has dared reveal thy secret face? What fearsome weight is borne by thee alone? Truly truth itself cannot be e'er denied. It shines in this, long after we have died. Thank you, Christopher, once again.
Well done, Christopher. Lovely.
And thank you, fellow Quillers, for inviting us into your car, your living room, your shower, your garden, your workout room, wherever it is that you listen to us. We are pleased to be on your list of favorite podcasts, and we hope that you will continue listening into 2022. Thank you for sharing this journey with us, and we hope to bring you more exciting episodes as we move forward. With that, I will say thank you and goodbye to executive producer of the program, Jake Lloyd Bacon, founder and owner of Dragon Wagon Radio Network and successful filmmaker. Thank you, Jake. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know how it goes. Say it with me. Keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.